When the crypt goes creak and the tombstones quake, spooks come out for a swinging wake. Happy haunts materialize
and begin to vocalize.
Grinning ghosts come out to socialize.
Oh, hey Fiber friends, and happy Halloween. Got my pumpkin hat on. We're here at the end of Fibertober. It's, I know, sad times. It is, as I film this, October 30th. Tomorrow's October 31st, Halloween, and I'm going to be putting this video up hopefully tomorrow morning, although I have a lot left to do before I do that, because it's just how I roll. I do everything last minute. So this was intended to be a hat that I would make a pattern out of and put up on Ravelry. I gave myself plenty of time. I'd love to say that I did not have time, and I'm sorry, it just wasn't in the cards. But it totally was, and so I thought that I would start off episode 2 here with a little bit of a, what do you call it? Not an intermission, an intervention. Start off with a little bit of an intervention about myself and how I just linger on these things. So something that did happen recently was I've been on a very long sabbatical and suddenly realized, hey, I'm out of money. I need a job. So I wrote to my old boss from 2 jobs ago. I said, hey, I'm out of money, can you help? And she said, hang on. And it felt like a week later I was sitting at a computer getting paid. So thank you very much, Chris. And I'd love to, and what happened was, of course, that sapped all my knitting energy. I thought, oh, I've still got nights and weekends. I'll get stuff done, and I didn't really. I'd love to say that that's why I didn't publish this pattern for this year. But it's October 30th, and I started working early September, right? And our story really begins back on May 25th. That's how long I've had to finish this thing. So on May 25th of this year, I was in Joann, the store, and I saw this yarn. It's Premier Yarns, Deborah Norville Every Day. That's Deborah Norville there. And I thought, oh, I want to make a pumpkin hat. And then I thought, wow, I want to make a pumpkin hat in May. I'm going to be so early for once. I'm going to make a thing early. But this sort of traffic cone orange here, it's called Bittersweet. Bittersweet. And I said, it's too orange. It's like comic, it's like cartoon orange, cartoon pumpkin. So I looked nearby and I saw this one. Same yarn, different color. This is Terracotta Heather, and it has like a brown heathering throughout. And I said, well, that's clay. That's clearly, this is the color of the tiles on my roof, actually. I said, that's not pumpkin-y, but I do want something more like rustic. And then I started looking at these two, and I went, what if I held them together? I might get that. This might muddy up this and bring it down with all these reds and browns, and I was doing this in the store, like twisting it, like with this, doing little barber poles, trying to see if the marled look might get me what I want. So I picked those up in hopes. And then as I was thinking, I thought, okay, now it's double-stranded, I'm going to be making this hat. And I said, but I want to make a jack-o'-lantern. I wanted to have a face. So then I was like, all right, I need to strand the knit now, right? I need to do stranded knitting. And then, of course, because I kind of love double knitting, and I thought, you know what? Does it make sense to double knit this hat? And basically, when you're double knitting, you're literally knitting 2 fabrics that are not the same fabric. And you do them, so you have a front fabric and a back fabric, and they're both on the needle at the same time. So you can do patterns, right? So I thought, what if I double knit it, right? So I'd have an orange hat with black eyes and mouth. But would it make sense flipped inside out? And I said, oh wait, yeah, it'd be a black pumpkin with orange eyes and mouth. It'd be like the nighttime version. That's kind of cool. So now I was talking about a double-stranded, double-knit pumpkin hat. And I thought, double, that's sort of like double, toil and pumpkin? No, trouble. I thought there's probably like a cool name in there. And it's kind of cool that it's double-stranded, double-knit. Of course, I thought, these are worsted weight yarns. This is going to be a really thick hat. But I wasn't really sold on like a jet black pumpkin hat with orange eyes and mouth. It could look cool, but I thought it would be kind of more cool to have like a pumpkin at dusk or something. So at first I was actually looking at green. Same yarn, Deborah Norville. This is pine green, and I was looking at this and I thought, it's just so green though. So I did the same thing. I said, what if I picked something like this, charcoal heather, and put them together, right? Just for good measure, I also picked up in the same yarn, this variegated yarn called oak moss. I said, that could be the stem if this doesn't work out. I could sort of see the pattern in my head because wandering the store there, I thought, I want it to have creases like a pumpkin, not just like lines, but like creases, like indents, and I want it to have bulges. I want them to bulge out like a pumpkin. So I thought about it for a minute and I said, oh, I think I can use this and that and this, and I think I can make that happen. Because a lot of the pumpkin things that you'll see, patterns, it'll be like a ball that you knit, and at the end you sew yarn through it and pull it tight, and that's what creates the creases. But this, I wanted it to be that you knit the whole thing and the creases were just part of the pattern. So I thought I had an idea of how that would work. Now I call these bulges gores, G-O-R-E, which is a sewing term. Gores, if you think of like a beach ball, you have those stripes that are like a point at one end and then they bulge across the middle and then they become a point on the other end. And they're done with curved edges, and when you sew a bunch of them together you get a round shape like a beach ball. That thing is called a gore. And you'll see them in parachutes halfway, and it's like half a beach ball. And you'll also see them in globes. So if you ever see old-timey globe making films, the people are painting the back of a gore and then gluing it onto like a paper mache ball. And then I was thinking I could also go with something like gory pumpkin, although I'd have to explain to everybody what that meant. But anyway, so I bought these 5 yarns, the terracotta and bittersweet, the charcoal heather and the pine green, and then just in case a fallback of oak moss, right? And then I went home and I couldn't do anything because it was the end of May and my mother's birthday was going to be June 18th, a few weeks away. And if you watch my first episode, you'll see that I did a whole bunch of stuff for her and the packaging, and I also made a thing for her friend to send along with her birthday box because her friend was going to be visiting. So go watch episode 1 if you haven't seen it, and I talk all about the things that I made for her and the cool things I found and added to it. So that's May 25th, 5 months ago, right? June 19th, I still hadn't done anything at all, but it was the day after her birthday, and just as a follow-up, she called me on the 18th and said I totally outdid myself, and the birthday was a huge success and she loved all the stuff. She couldn't believe I did all that because it was all done in secret. And so it was the day after her birthday that I finally went, okay, now I can get back to making stuff. So I found myself in Joann again, the store. And that's how it usually happens. I find myself in Joann. I'm like, whoa, I'm in Joann. I guess I'll buy yarn. I don't know how it happens. While I was there, I bought the same 4 skeins of yarn again because I thought, if I'm going to design this as a pattern, I need to knit a bunch of them to do different sizes. So I bought the same 4 yarns again, except when it came to the black yarn, I actually bought this one. So I called this charcoal heather before. It's not. This is obsidian. This is more of a tweed look. And this is not Premier, it's Lion Brand, and it's not Deborah Norville, it's Vanna. I didn't notice until I got home. I was a little bit dismayed. I was like, oh great, they're all going to be Deborah Norville and one yarn's going to be Vanna. Oh well. Can't have everything though, right? So that rekindled my interest. I came home, I put the 4 new yarns away, took out the 4 old yarns, and I swatched. And I swatched for 2 reasons. For one, I wanted to figure out what my gauge was going to be, because now I'm holding them double, right? So now it's not a worsted weight yarn anymore. And I've noticed with a few projects where I've held double, I end up going up 2 yarn weights. And that's what happened here, I think. What I do is I twist the yarns so that they're like applied yarn. Not enough to squeeze them and squish the yarn down, but just enough so that it's like a yarn that has a round shape. And then I wrap it around a ruler and I get the wraps per inch, which is how many strands fit in an inch. And then you look up on a table basically and you say, this many wraps per inch, what is that? And it turned out to be, I think, super bulky, and I'm pretty sure I knit this on an 11, right? So I swatched, and it came out great. That was the second reason. The first reason was to figure out the needles and the gauge, how many stitches I get per inch, how many rows I get per inch, but also because I wanted to see, do these 2 yarns, the bittersweet and the terracotta heather, look like rustic pumpkin-y yarn to me? And they did. They looked really pretty. And after I did that, I swatched again right away. I know some people just absolutely hate swatching, so they would not have been having the party I was having that night. I swatched the pine green and not the obsidian here, but the charcoal heather that I had originally, which you have not seen yet. But it looked really good. And I said, okay, I think I've got my two things here. And so, what did I do? I waited almost another month until August 14th. And then I finally said, okay, I have to do this, because my plan was to release this in September. I charted out a gore on my computer with the increases and decreases that I liked, based on my row gauge, so it would be long enough. And I also charted out 4 faces, and this took like 2 days to do. So that night, August 14th, I cast on and I began knitting. And the thing that I noticed right away, 2 things. One, it was really thick. But there's something different about like 2 worsted weight yarns versus a similarly weighted single yarn. I don't know, there's something like there's more tension. And also, I'm double knitting at this point. It means that the increases that I'm doing have to be done on the knit side of the front fabric and on the purl side of the back fabric. So I was doing make one lefts and make one rights for every gore. And it was exhausting doing the make ones with that thick yarn and those big needles. I don't know why, but it was just, I kept losing, kept slipping off the thing, and when I would get it, it was like a fight, like I was trying to knit loosely, but it wasn't really helping. So I think it was just something, because it was 2 worsted weight yarns on big needles. I don't know. But I did find that it was kind of a chore just going around once, and that was sort of killing my mojo, because I thought, even if I finish this thing, which is exhausting me, I'm only like 10 rows in and I don't want to go anymore. I'm going to be releasing this pattern to people, and they're going to be saying like, oh, I couldn't finish it. It was too tough on my hands. So I have it all in a box right now because I took it in the car. I can show you, and it's funny, here's the yarns. And in fact, now I can show you the charcoal heather. It looks like this. You can see it's got the white all through it, little flecks. And that's Deborah Norville. And this is the Vanna White. It looks kind of similar, but it's more tweedy. It has all these little tweedy bits in it. And this is more like, there's like a thin white strand running through there or something. So, very soft, it's really squishy. And in fact, it's like, if I shake it around, like little fibers go everywhere. I've noticed that the really soft acrylics, wow, shed like crazy. And that's why they're so soft. You can also see that I have frogged a lot, so I have these double-stranded frog piles. But anyway, so this is how much I got done. Obviously, I actually got done a lot more. You can see I frogged a lot. This was like round 2. The other thing that I find interesting about this, because I can't remember now, but this basically fits on my head. This is the beginning, and it fits properly. Like, that's the right amount of tension to me for a hat. I have tried to do double knit hats a few times now. I think this might be the 3rd or the 4th. It's at least the 3rd, maybe the 4th. And every time I finished, they were huge. Like knit for a giant. The last one that I did fit my head exactly. So it didn't stretch on at all. It just plopped on me like a dome. And it was like, there's no stretch whatsoever. This thing, it doesn't even know that my head is here. And if I went like this, it would just fall off like a dome, like a bowl. And I finally learned what that was. I actually figured it out one day. I said, wait a minute, I think I know what's going on here. And it's kind of obvious now. But what I would do is I would knit a swatch of stockinette, and I would measure to get my gauge. I would multiply that up by the inches. I have a 24-inch head, the largest head you ever see in knitting patterns for hats. So a very, very big head. And then I would use that gauge when double knitting. And I thought one day, I said, wait a minute, are these all coming out too big because double knitting gauge is different? And I said, that kind of stands to reason, because remember, you're doing this. You have a fabric on the front and a fabric on the back, and they're sharing a needle. So they're, every other stitch. Well, it turns out that the bar that connects one stitch to the next has to stretch a little bit to allow the other fabric on the needle, right? Which means that there are fewer stitches per inch because they're spread out more. So what I did was, in just regular worsted weight yarn on number 8 needles, I knit a stockinette swatch, got my gauge, frogged it, got another yarn of the same everything, same brand, just different color, and I double knit a swatch. And I measured the gauge, and what I learned was that the double knit has 80% the stitches in the stitch gauge as the singly knit stockinette. So I'm talking about the fabric on one side, and mine were both the same. They're basically the same to the stitch. So what that means is, for example, in knitting you usually measure in a 4-inch square or a 10-centimeter square, which is about the same. If I was getting 10 stitches per inch in regular stockinette, like just single fabric, then when I did double knit stockinette and just measured one of the fabrics, I was only getting 8 stitches, right? So not 10, but 8, 80% of the stitches, which meant that when I was multiplying, I was making the hat about that much bigger. I should have made it 80% the size and it would have fit. So I kind of feel like I knew that by this point, and that's why this fits. I was being a wimp. I could have done this. You know, I had months to finish this, but I put it away and I didn't go back to it. But I do really like that look. It kind of has that rustic-y country look that I was looking for. And I really like the green side too. Although I'm not 100% convinced that that makes for a good pumpkin color at night. It is really pretty. Flash forward about a week, August 20th. I decided, you know what? It's getting really close to September and I gotta release this thing. I'm gonna switch to single knit. I'm just gonna do a single one. So, and I'm not gonna do any faces. I just wanna see a pumpkin happen. It's been months I've been trying to make this thing. So, I made the hat August 20th. It looked pretty good. It looked like this. And I sent a picture to my mom and she wrote back, "That looks great." And I hadn't done the stem, but I was tilted back a little bit so you couldn't see it, right? And in fact, the stem would not come around for a while still. So that was August 20th, right? I did not move on to the stem. I had another of my just freezes. I just froze, didn't finish it. August 31st, end of August now. I was in Joann, the store, and I saw the Lion Brand Woolies Thick and Quick. And I still had pumpkins on my mind, of course, because we're at the end of August, right? And I saw these 2 yarns. And I was back and forth, like, should I get them? Should I not get them? Whatever. But then I looked at the names. And this one is called Pumpkin, and this one is called Spice. And I was like, all right, I'm buying them. I think I was just looking to procrastinate, and I immediately cast on and started knitting. I did a gauge first. And I even started to do the patterning. I was starting to do the little shapes that I had done for the faces. So there's the orange side and the red side. This is as far as I went. I played that night and I put it away and I just haven't gone back to it because I've just been, all over the place like a puppy playing with ideas. But part of the problem there was it was again having to do make one lefts and rights on the front and on the back is sort of exhausting, and I just didn't want to power through it. And then I had to figure out how I'm going to do the decreases at the top, and it didn't take a lot for some reason. I did just sort of keep stopping myself. Something that I'm going to try to get better at. So I wanted to have the right number of gores for a pumpkin, right? The gory pumpkin. I mean, eventually I looked at real pumpkins. This is called a Jack B. Little. And the thing that stood out to me was that they always have 10 lobes, every one of them. Anyway, I decided then that this looks very pumpkininy to me and I want to do 10 gores. So there are 10 gores, 10 bulges. And then it was time to grade it. And the problem, though, with needing to fit the pattern of the ribbing and the pattern of the gores was that I really needed a multiple of 20, which cuts down on how many ways you can do this. So this I think is 100 stitches, and then I did 80 and 60, and I did not get male, female, and child. I got men's, and then I got something that I think is like toddler, and then I got something that I think is like newborn. So they all kind of don't really have a whole lot more to say about this hat. But I think I'm going to go back to the drawing board on a few things, play around with the design, and come up with a test knit pattern for next year. All right, it's Halloween 2018. Right? What am I doing with a fisherman's beanie on my head? Am I going as a fisherman for Halloween? No. Fishermen keep their eyes on the sea, but my hat keeps its eyes on me. This is a 2-color stranded colorwork hat done in white and glow-in-the-dark. So a few months ago, while I was doing all this pumpkin hat nonsense, I thought, it'd be kind of cool if there was glow-in-the-dark yarn. And I don't know why that popped into my head. So I looked, and there was a glow-in-the-dark yarn made by Bernat, and it's not available anywhere. So I did check Ravelry, and I found people who had it, and I found one woman who was amenable to selling it, but not then. She was like, can you get back to me in like a month or two? And this was months ago, so I said, yeah, probably, that's fine. I'll hit you up again. And I never did. Because there was another option, a fallback, and it was Gert's Glow House yarn. Gert's Glow House is the only glow-in-the-dark yarn I can find anywhere. It's amazing that there's one. It's fingering, and I gotta say, it's light fingering. It's very light. It's 4-ply. 50 grams, 1.75 ounces. Bought 2 of them. Now I was very worried because I just don't work with fingering weight yarns ever. So I didn't know, is this a lot of yarn? What do I need? And it turns out that this, I never used any. And after making the whole hat, and I didn't, I stranded this thing so that it's one spiral all the way around of this glow yarn, and I still have this giant ball, which is I don't know, I gotta weigh this and see what it is. Maybe I'll put it on the screen if I figure it out. But put that in the light for a moment. And it is really bright. Now it's coming out brighter on the screen than it really is, but it's still quite bright. And it lasts for a little bit. You get like 5 or 10 minutes out of it. And the bottom is 1x1 rib, right? And then I just made it just long enough because I really wasn't sure if I was gonna have enough yarn. Once it got there, then I had charted out the whole pattern, and it looked like this. And I spent a lot of time using the internet, and because it's really hard to just draw eyeballs well, to make them look good. And charted that whole thing out, figured out for the size of my head. I was very careful because I was like, I got one shot at this. I did not know I was going to have enough to make like 4 more hats. But anyway, I did run into some problems. It does fit my head, but like a lot of my hats, it's too short. I don't know why I always do that. I always think this looks long enough, and then it isn't. And if you see, it's really pinched up here. Now this yarn is 100% polyester. It has no stretch to it. And it actually feels like really flimsy kite string. It's very floppy, very soft actually surprisingly soft. But if it's really thin, it's like kite string. And that's what everybody on the website on Amazon was saying, all the reviewers. But you can see it has like a drapiness to it, It's got a little bit of spring to it. Now what I needed was to find a yarn that matched this, because I was back and forth with ideas, and I thought, no, I think ultimately what I want to do is make an all white hat, and when you turn off the lights, there's eyeballs everywhere. And let me turn this off now that it's not on my head, and I will spin it around and charge it up. Right, so you can see it has scary eyeballs and curious eyeballs and little teeny eyeballs. My camera keeps dimming. That's not the hat dimming, that's my hat adjusting to the darkness, but you can still see them. So it goes all the way around. And yeah, so it's a total mix. I was pulling eyeballs off of like clip art and all kinds of things online, and then bringing them way down and did my little thing is like the image that I had. It's the size of the number of stitches, so it's this tiny little, each of these stitches is a pixel. So you can see when it's like this, the hat actually has a nice curvature to it. But when I open it out as a hat, it's all puckered. Now, I actually knit all the way to the end, and the decreases were too fast. So it was 160 stitches. So I broke it into 10 groups of 16 stitches. I'm sorry, 16 groups of 10 stitches. The other way would be really fast. And then what I did was I knit a round, and then I did a decrease round. So every 10 became 9. Did another round, right? And it was really bad. Like it was so much more puckered than even this. So I let it sit there for a few days, and then I said, okay, let's do this. I still had more of the other yarn, the yarn that's being used for the non-glow-in-the-dark regions. So I actually picked my woven in end out and unraveled all the way back to the glow section and put all 160 stitches back on the needles. And by the way, this was knit in size 0, 7-inch size 0 bamboo clover takumi needles. It was a little tense. You can see the stranding is kind of a mess, and it is too tight, unfortunately. I know about that, and this is really my first full stranded anything. I've done like little swatches and things, but I was pulling to get it to be loose, and I don't know, I didn't do it right. I didn't do it enough. So you can see it's very pouchy, all those little things. So it's almost a texture. I mean, I don't hate it because it's almost like it's supposed to look like that. You know, like I could see somebody saying like, how did you design all of the little pockets? Because you don't see the design, so you're just like, is it supposed to be kind of like covered in little baubles or whatever, little baubles? No. So I picked the whole thing out, and I actually redid the pattern of decrease rounds, and did all the math and everything, and I decreased every like third row until I got to the last few, and then I did every 2 rows, and it still came out super pouchy. So I do not understand decreasing fingering weight yarn yet. But whatever. This was just a little experiment, and it's not like I'm going to wear this. It is very thin. It has a weird feeling to it. I've actually felt clothing like this. And here's the thing. I needed to find a yarn to go with this. This is like my contrast color, really, the glow in the dark. I needed to find my main color that was going to be that rest of the hat. But it had to fit some criteria. It had to be the same weight, because I really wanted this thing to not look like it was made of 2 different yarns. I wanted it to hold together so you don't see the glow in the dark parts until the lights are off, you know, except for my tight stranding, my unfortunate stranding. But I also needed, what was the other thing? Oh, I needed the white colors to match up, because I actually have other white yarn. But when I would hold the 2 yarns together, I'd go, oh, this is like off-white and this is like bright white, or, you know, and you'd see that. So, you know, I don't have a ton of money to just go buying random yarns to test. Like, give me 10 different white yarns and let me see. Give me all your white fingering yarns. So I thought, you know, this is so much like string. I bet I could go to Home Depot and just look around at all their different kinds of strings. So I did that. I went to Home Depot and I found the yarn, quote unquote, that matched. And it was DeWalt chalk line replacement. So it's 100 feet or 30 meters of chalk line. Now, if you're not a builder, if you have no idea what that is, chalk line is used by anybody laying out who basically needs to have a ruler and draw a line, but like the length of a roof or the length of an entire building. What it is a little metal canister that looks like a big tape measure, and has a hook on the end, kind of like at the end of a tape measure. But then instead of the tape, it has this string. And it works like a tape measure, but it doesn't auto rewind. There's a little crank on the side to wind it back in. And then inside is full of chalk powder, usually like blue or orange. And you can buy replacement bottles that have a little squirt nozzle, and you put them in and you squeeze all the chalk powder back in to fill them back up. And then what you do is you give one end to a person usually, and they walk to the other end of a roof and they measure down, you know, or they already have the marks measured, and they put the thing there. And then you're at the other end holding the thing. You both press the line down to the roof, for example, and then one of you picks up the string and lets it go, and it snaps, and it basically draws a chalk line across the whole length. And so then you can do something like put your shingles on all the way across against that line so that they all line up, so you don't end up with like a wiggly shingle line. So they're used all over for layout jobs like that, where you need to lay out something really big, like, you know, where the boards are going to be cut off on a deck. So you put it on both ends, you know, you have your boards, they all stick out different lengths. You put the thing, and then you just run with a saw right along that line and cut it all flush so they all match up. So I went, 100 feet, that's 33.3 yards, right? I think, yeah. So I bought 3 of them because I wasn't sure. And they were only $2.47 each. And then it became clear as I was knitting, like, I need like 3 more of these. So I bought 3 more. And then I thought I was going to run out. So on the way home from work one day, I picked up another one. Was it from work? I think I was coming home from a fiber festival. A little fiber get-together thing. But I did not run out. I still have this little bit left. So I only needed 6. So 6 times $2.47, whatever that is, in this yarn. And then, I don't know, 12, 18 bucks, whatever. I think it was 12-ish. Maybe 18 for 2 of these. I think it was 18. So a little pricey. And this feels like a really thick, I'm trying to think, like, is it a cotton shirt? It's like a thicker cotton shirt, or like a really thin cotton jacket, maybe. Feels nice, actually, because most of it is, I looked it up because it doesn't say it on here, but this is 100% cotton, so it's basically fingering weight cotton yarn. So I thought that was kind of cool. Okay, so one of the things that I did to make this hat here that I worked on possible was I picked up this Blacklight from Party City, right? So it's just your standard party Blacklight. And there's an aspect of this that I hadn't thought of when I was originally thinking through this idea. So we know that I got the glow-in-the-dark yarn, right? The Gert's Glow House yarn. And also that I picked up the DeWalt chalk line because they looked a lot like each other. In fact, if you look in daylight, they're very similar in look. And I have other yarns like Harbor here. This is from Joanne, Fair Isle Harbor. But these didn't, and it's going to be hard to tell on the camera, but here, this looks dirtier than this. This looks very pure white, right? So I figured if I knit those up, it wasn't going to work out. And these have a similar disparity, but it's hard to tell here on the camera. So this was going to be a possibility, but there's an interesting aspect here that I didn't think of ahead of time. I bought this because I thought when I'm knitting, I'm not going to be able to see which yarn is which. So it's going to be hard to count stitches or figure out where I left off. So I thought if I could have this to make the yarn flare, that would help a lot. The problem is that Harbor, it wasn't a problem for me as it is because I didn't use the Harbor, but if I had used the Harbor, these two actually flare very similarly. In fact, the Harbor flares much more, significantly more, I think. Or they're really close, but Harbor pulls ahead. And Harbor's label even flares a lot. You can see it really glowing through my fingers there. The camera exposure, of course, isn't going to make it too obvious. But this is the chalk line. And if I bring this up, you'll see that the chalk line is really dull. And it lights up, of course, because this is a light. There's visible light. There's not just the infrared. But the glow yarn really glows. The Harbor glows even more, and these really don't. Right? So if I'd used these two things, then the Blacklight wouldn't have really helped me at all. So thankfully I picked this, and I didn't know at the time that it was not going to be Blacklight susceptible at all. Because this is cotton yarn as well. This is 100% cotton, and this is, 50-50, I think, cotton and bamboo. So it's just the dye that was used. So the difference, of course, comes in when we turn the Blacklight off and we're in the dark. You'll see only our two glow yarns keep on glowing, and man, do they glow. It's you can see the part that was on the table is still dark, but I mean, these are bright enough that they almost work like flashlights. They are really surprisingly bright. So and there's the undersides. So it's a little brighter on the camera than it is in real life, but it's still just surprisingly bright. So if I juice this up, you can even see it glowing here. And here's the darker side, but now I've charged it up. The Blacklight charges up this glow stuff super quickly, instantly. So now I turn that off, and I mean, it's lighting up the table. So it's really cool. It feels like I'm holding some sort of radioactive material. You probably charge that one up a little bit with this one. And it lasts for a little while, you get like 10 minutes or so. It doesn't just then go out, but anyway. So, this is how I knit the hat. So I left I actually had this propped up on some boxes at my desk, and it was almost like being at a point of sale checking counterfeit dollars. Like I kept holding it under the light. So I had this up on some boxes. And you can see that the floats inside actually glow through the material. So you can actually see a little bit through. And speaking of floats, the inside you can really see. Now we turn it inside out. You can really see all the float work because it glows. So unfortunately my floats were too tight. But the camera doesn't really do it justice. It really flares in my vision in real life. Camera makes it kind of dull. And here in my vision, it looks like the dark part of the hat is slightly purplish, and that the glowing strands are bright white, like tooth commercial bright glowing white. On the camera they look yellow, and the hat looks a little more blue, but pretty cool. And of course you can light it up inside. And you see all that stuff flaring through. So if we turn off the Blacklight now, this thing is glowing like it's on fire. It's like radioactive. Even with the camera dimming down to auto expose for the dark. So this was a fun project. I learned some things, very odd project. And I learned something actually while making this episode. This pouchiness up here I thought was because I was decreasing too quickly. And now I think what I'm seeing is I'm decreasing too slowly. Because if I fold this flat, right, so there's no pouchiness, it kind of wraps around. That's flat on both sides. It wraps around quite a bit. So I think what's happening is there's too much fabric in here because, right there, that's actually really nice. That's nice rounding. So I think what happened was I didn't decrease quickly enough. So who knows, maybe I will take this out and pull my yarn out, pull it all the way back down to the glowing part, and then just knit for a while longer the cylinder without decreasing, and then do much more rapid decreasing at the top. And then maybe this will finally, aside from the floats being too tight, maybe this will actually be a hat that would fit on my head. You can see the tightness of the floats actually, like there's two eyes right there. So if we turn the light off, you can see. Yeah. Anyway, fun project. You can see the frilliness of this. I did a tubular cast on, so this wraps right around. Of course, it's in a super light fingering weight yarn. And it really feels like, heavy cotton. So. I had a couple other stash acquisitions, as the knitters will often say. And it's funny because I realized, if you buy yarn for a project and it doesn't quite work out, you can still just say, hey, look, I got some yarn. People like to see that too. I know I do. So while I was there at Joann and I was getting the Woolies Thick and Quick, I happened to walk by this box of this stuff, Zizi Twist. Now I've been learning a little bit about spinning because I think that's going to be my next thing that I'm interested in the fiber world. And I was kind of like walking by and saw it and like walked backwards and went, wait a minute, is that a Z Twist yarn? So for anyone who does not know this, and I don't know why you necessarily would if you aren't into like spinning yarn, you see how the yarn, the way it's spun, it creates these little things that go this way. It's, that's the way the stripe winds up the pole. And when you turn it around, it's the same. So you can see, even though the yarn's going both directions now, that all the slanting is in the same direction. So it doesn't matter which side you look at or which direction it's oriented. It just matters that you look at the slash, the slant. And the way that the twist is talked about is in terms of the bar being part of either the letter S or the letter Z. So if you imagine this slash having a little curve on the top and bottom, it looks like an S. Like that looks like the center line of the S. You have this, and then the slash, and then the curve at the bottom, right? Well, if the slash were to go the other way, and you imagine a little flat bar on the top and bottom, it would look like a Z, right? And the Z, the slash goes this way, not this way, the way this yarn is doing. So Z Twist yarn is just yarn that's spun the opposite way, and it creates little slants the opposite way. So that's what this is, Zizi Twist. I think it's a little parody on ZZ Top. A little play on that name for some reason. I don't think we need a whole lot for a pun. Anyway, Zizi Twist is spun the other way. The reason that you would even spin either way is if you are, let's say you want to do a 4-ply yarn, one of the things you can do is do 2 2-ply yarns and then ply those together as though they were 2 yarns themselves. And what you do is you spin them both the same way, so maybe you would do a Z twist for both of those. And then when you ply them together, you ply them S twists. And what happens is you create a thing where the fibers want to spin the opposite way and they lock themselves together. So they actually twist in the energy in the yarn twists in such a way that it pulls the twist of the larger yarn together. So that's not why they created these. That's what I thought when I saw this, like, is this supposed to be for spinners? But the idea here is that supposedly, because of the way most people yarn over when they're doing crochet, this yarn is supposed to look better. It's like you get better stitch definition because of the way the loops are made in crochet. So that's all I had to hear. I looked it up on my phone to see what is this thing, because it doesn't really tell you on the band. And I said, okay, techie stuff, I'm curious. So I picked that up. And on a later trip, I picked this up. I wanted to get brown because I wanted to do a pumpkin-y thing. Of course, now, the season's going to be over soon, so I could do something else with it. But I just couldn't find a brown, and this is called taupe. This one, by the way, is called pumpkin, of course. I gotta say, the ZZ Twist was interesting to me, but I didn't like a lot of the colors. They didn't have many, and the ones they had I was a little so-so on. So I said, well, I guess that's the closest I'm gonna get to a thing. I don't think it works. I don't think it's gonna be a pumpkin. But anyway, that was one of my little stash acquisitions. The other 2 things I got were some Red Heart Super Saver and some Big Twist Value. And these are both called pumpkin. And I thought it'd be kind of cool to do like a double-stranded something or other. So, and I actually have this big frogged held double frog pile because I was trying to do a short rose pumpkin, and I might still play with that idea because I still have something to learn about regular wrap and turn short rows. Got fiber everywhere. I know how to do it, but I don't think I'm yet at the point where I'm designing properly with it, because when I go back and forth and I want to do certain things, I want to wrap and turn where I already have a wrap waiting to be picked up. So I have to play more with that. I've actually played quite a bit with it. I just haven't gotten to the point where I've figured out what I want. So anyway, I got 2 pumpkin yarns here. I have a lot of pumpkin. Look at all these. Look at all these pumpkin-y yarns that I have. I have this too. We'll get to that. I learned something interesting though on this yarn because it says the name and then it says the name in French and in Spanish. And I learned citrouille is French, however you pronounce that. But Spanish is calabaza. Calabaza. Well, I live in LA and we have a town here called Calabasas. So I went to Wikipedia and looked it up. And son of a gun, if I didn't know this whole time that Spanish people have known, that town is called Pumpkins. So now I know when I'm going, if I ever have to go to Calabasas, that I'm going to Pumpkins. I know the real story now. Anyway, so that's a little bit of stash acquisition. Moving on. A yarn that I've seen at Joann many times is Bernat Maker Outdoor, right? And you can see by the pictures that they sort of intend for you to use it to make pillows for your deck chairs, right? And this is a 68% acrylic, 32% nylon. So it's actually like a crocheted tube of thin nylon string almost with an acrylic core. It's just kind of like a fuzzy roving, right, of acrylic, pencil roving. So I would always pick this up in the store and think, I have no ideas for what I want to do with this. And this ended up on the clearance rack months ago for only just under $5. So I picked it up and it's still sitting there. This is royal blue, I think. Yeah. And I really didn't know what to do with it. But then sometime during all of this pumpkin work I was doing here, I ended up at Joann and I found another one on the clearance rack, and it was the only Bernat Maker on the clearance rack, and it was orange. And of course, it's the end of the season, so they're putting all of their summery things, these outdoor deck chair yarns, on clearance, but there was only one of them, and it was orange, and in fact it's called oranges, not pumpkin, because it's a summer thing, so you want to talk about orange. You don't want to put pumpkin yarn for your summer stuff. Anyway, this is what I have left over, because while I was in the store, I thought, pumpkins are orange, and pumpkins go outdoors too. I'm going to get it. So again, it was $4.97. And it just sat in the drawer, waiting. And then I stumbled onto this pattern by Ling Ryan, Langryan, Ling Ryan. I actually stumbled onto this on the internet and backtracked from there to Ravelry and found it. And it is this. It's a lidded pumpkin bowl. It has a lid that falls off. Has a, bottom like a piece of pottery would have. This does use the sewn technique at the end, so you build it does have the bulges, but then you kind of pull these creases in. I forget how many it has, like 7, 6, see 2, 4, 6. It has 6. And inside it had a baby. So this was a really cool pattern. Ling, I don't know if if I should say he or she or what, but Ling knows their stuff, because the pattern is full of switching to rows of knit through the front and knit through the back loop, or single crochet, whatever, through the front loops and through the back loops, and these walls are actually stuffed. So, and in fact, I'll come back to that. The walls are stuffed with polyfill, and you can see there's like shaping, and what was really cool about this is that you crocheted it as a big tube, and it's like a tube that has all these shapings and things, and then you fold it through, and you keep crocheting. It's not like a separate thing, you're still crocheting, but you fold the whole thing up and you crochet around, stuffing as you go to seal it up. And then, so it has so much architecture to it. It's really interesting. And the lid is similarly architected. It has all this, like this is probably like knit through the back loops or something, so you could fold it better, so that it would fold over. And then this is actually double-stranded. I didn't have a bulky green yarn, so I actually held green and gray, just acrylic. But whatever, it's fine. But yeah, the pattern actually called for shaping that gave it a little bit of a curve. So it's pretty cool. So I knit this, or I crocheted this, while I was supposed to be making different sized hats for the pattern release that I never did. So when I got that, when I landed that job for 6 weeks, which turned into 2 months, and Halloween time rolled around, I brought this in, and I got a $15 bag of chocolate, you know, like Hershey's and whatever, all those little bite-sized chocolate bars. And I filled it, I put it on the table behind me at the company there. There was an area behind me where people have lunch sometimes, so there's a table. I put it in the middle, round table, filled it to teeming and had it spilling out. And then I put the lid just like resting against it. And I didn't know, but that night was the night that they were planning to put decorations all over. So when I came in the next day, they had put a black lace doily under it and 2 candles, black and orange, with the opposite color dots up them, flickering on, and it looked really cool. So I was, you know, I think it sat there for an hour with nobody going to it. I thought, oh, maybe these people don't like chocolate. There's a lot of thin people. And I have to say, it was a research place, so people had a lot of students and interns working on their PhDs and things, all in robotics and computer vision and artificial intelligence and all that kind of stuff. And I was really impressed to see that it was loaded with young women. So it was packed. And in fact, every day, more young women were coming from around the corner, and I finally walked around there like, what is going on over here? I was starting to think, like, I know you guys do robotics here. Are you creating no young women? Because every day there were like 5 more young women walking by. And I kept going, where are all these women coming from? So it's really good to see that the tides are shifting and that it's not all men. I have worked at many companies over the last 15 years where it's really literally been just all men. So it was kind of cool to see. And it wasn't like, a lot of times I would go to a place and I'd be like, oh, there's women. And then you find out it's secretaries, it's HR, it's more administrative. But no, this was women with welding goggles on and soldering stuff and programming and doing all the stuff that I traditionally see the guys doing. So it was really cool to see. So it was the women who fell for my pumpkin first. I was sitting there working on something, and I heard a woman go, "Ooh, chocolate!" And I turned around. There were two women raiding the chocolates, and I thought it was funny that the woman who said that was obviously very particular. She was digging through the whole thing looking for her specific chocolate, and then from then on, it was a free for all day long. Men and women were eating chocolates. I thought it was really, really fun. Made me feel good that I brought in something that everybody could enjoy. And one of the young women that I worked with, she finally figured out, she said, "Wait, did you bring this in?" I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Did you make this?" I said, "Yeah, I crochet." And she went, "It's got so much architecture to it." I was like, "I know, right? It's not my pattern. It's really cool." So anyway, that was fun too. I had a good time with that. And they went through the whole bag. It was like one of those big, office-sized bags, and over the course of a few days, they plowed through it. So they're not as thin as they were. If you follow me on Instagram, you might have seen a few weeks ago that I posted a kind of funny video of me using my drop spindle for the first time, and I talked about liking breed-specific yarn, and I showed off this fiber that I'd gotten my hands on. And I talked about how it had nice crimp to it. And then, of course, the big reveal, the joke, was that it was, the breed was spider. And it was spider yarn from, it's actually the spider webs you buy at I went to Party City. So, it is really soft. It is like the softest cottony feeling. But I also got another brand. It's funny, this is such cheap stuff. It's not like brand names. They're both called spider webs. This one stretches to 40 square feet. Se extende hasta 3.71 meters squared. And this one doesn't. It's super grandes. 4.24 ounces. So of course knitters know what that means, right? 120 grams. That's enough to make a sweater. No, not a sweater. It's enough to make a hat. But this one felt so much worse. It's like, ugh. This one was so soft. So soft. It's all catching on my hangnails. This one I was like, ugh. I was like, this is like British wool. Like the wools that have to, they have to be like that to repel the water because it's so moist over there. But this one was kind of cool because when you stretch it, it creates those real networks of webs. I thought that was that's something going for it. And this one is more, I guess it still has them, but it's a lot more fuzzy looking. So now I'm becoming a connoisseur of plastic spiderweb fiber. Well, I had made a drop spindle, so I actually spun some yarn. And it's funny because this stuff that's so soft, it's amazing. It's like the softest sheep wool. It feels like Polwarth. It actually made a yarn that's really squishy. So, it is a yarn. It actually worked. Right? So, I thought it would be fun to knit something up. I also, I think I'll just, there we go. It's funny though because it does not come apart the way regular, like the drafting, the length of these fibers is, like, I can't stretch that out because it's longer than that. I actually have to go way out here in order to draft. But you can do it. I mean, the staple length it's like a foot. I keep saying staple length. I don't know enough yet. Is it just staple? I think that means length. So this is my little drop spindle, and this is the nastier fiber, but I made a lot. This stuff is much worse to draft because you go all the way over to here and it still isn't drafting. It's like the entire thing is one big long fiber or something. There's no separation between these fibers. So like this is all one piece. I go way over to here and it's still one piece. I was like, where's the end of this fiber? And I don't think there is. I think it might actually literally be a big coil. I don't know. But so I was trying to draft this way. I was like, all right, I'll do some woolen. And what I figured out was that I could, if I tore the fibers, then I was kind of creating my own staple out of it. So I was sitting there going, literally like tearing at the fiber to kind of pre-draft. I'm doing a terrible job there, but I was actually getting like a pencil roving sort of. So that was enough for me to spin this, and I thought it would be kind of cool to try to make something out of it. So let's do it. I'm doing Andean hand plying here. First time ever. So that I can ply from one source of yarn, which I haven't done yet either. Let's see. Gotta keep remembering these directions. This is a lot of yarn. Well, I just Andean plied this, which is the first thing that I have ever Andean plied. So it's made me a nice balanced yarn. And this is made from Spiderweb, the plastic store-bought party store spider web for Halloween.
When the crypt goes creak and the tombstones quake, spooks come out for a swinging wake. Happy haunts materialize
and begin to vocalize.
Grim grinning ghosts come out to socialize. Now don't close your eyes and don't try to hide, or a silly spook may sit by your side, shrouded in a daft disguise.
They pretend to terrorize.
Grim grinning ghosts come out to socialize. As the moon climbs high or the dead oak tree.
And there you have it. We turned these lovely spider locks into this little guy. So I spun it and then I Andean plied it. First time I've ever done Andean plying. And now we have a little ghost. Crocheted him. He was crocheted on an E 3.5 millimeter Clover Amour hook. So there he is. All right, happy Halloween, everyone. Be safe out there, trick-or-treating tonight.
When you hear the knell of a requiem bell, weird glows gleam where the spirits dwell, restless bones and